Greetings, everyone. I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. As you can tell from the title up there, I'm continuing my trek through the episodes of Everybody Loves Raymond. Here we are, Season 5, Episode 5, Pet Cemetery. This is another one written by Steve Skrovan, and we get a little bit more from Allie in this episode, but that's because it focuses on her pet hamster, Pumpernickel, and his unfortunate demise. R.I.P. Hamster. Before I get too far into it, just a reminder that if you want to support the channel, both the Patreon and PayPal links are down below. If you want to just do one-off support or a one-off request, the PayPal link is there. If you want to support the channel continuously, go with the Patreon. You'll gain access to videos early, and you'll also be able to suggest topics for future videos, including ones that involve two youths. Now, this episode is one of those ones that it's a typical sitcom episode. Doesn't really build off of the previous one. Doesn't really set any seeds for the other thing. The only part of continuity it builds off of is the fact that Allie has a hamster, which has been mentioned off and on since the beginning of the show. It's just we've never seen the hamster or heard its name until now. So I have a feeling this is one where they were throwing about stuff in the writer's room. It's like, let's go with this. Maybe somebody had a hamster that died and they brought it up, and then Steve's like, oh, I got an idea. Hey, doesn't Allie have a hamster? Oh, yeah. And then they went with it. This is one that could have been any time in the show, but with how old the kids are getting, both in real life and in the show, this is the perfect time to do it. Allie is starting to go in the beginning part of adolescence, so perfect here. And also the twins have a little bit more autonomy now. Now, with the episode, it begins with Ray frantically tearing apart the front room because the hamster got out of its cage. How'd that happen? Well, apparently there's something wrong with one part of the cage where you gotta close it just right, or else Pumpernickel can get out. Either he can somehow finagle his way out, or the door opens, the hamster comes over and like, ooh, open door. Either way is plausible, because you know how these little critters are. I've never had a hamster, but I have had a guinea pig before, and they'll get out. I mean, guinea pig is a little bit bigger, so a little bit easier to find, especially when you hear him going. They're looking around for it. Frank and Marie come over and they join in. And they eventually find Pumpernickel in the freezer. Apparently, after cleaning the cage, Ray went shopping. And he did not notice Pumpernickel get into one of the bags. And that bag happened to have some fudge pops in it. And into the freezer he went. I mean, we don't see it, but he must look so bad in there. Even Frank gives us a holy crap, and his face is like when he sees it. So it doesn't look good. Now, Ray decided to do the typical Ray thing, and he's going to get a replacement pet and just put it in. Now, this is temporarily sidestepped by Robert, but here we get to see a little bit more of Ray being insensitive, and also, it is what it is, him thinking the kids are stupid. I mean, he doesn't come out and say that, but it's just the way he's acting. He's thinking that Allie's not going to notice. I mean, with how old she's getting, she's almost 10 if I'm doing my math right. So she should know. I mean, there might be some kids that might not notice a switcheroo like this, but Allie's smart enough to know, and when Ray does actually try to do the whole, oh, here's your hamster, honey, she instantly knows it's not Pumpernickel. This isn't Pumpernickel. It's one of those things that, like, Ray, that might have worked like maybe a couple years ago, but it's not going to work now. Kids are smarter than you give them credit for. It's one of those things about Ray, he doesn't really think. And even when he's trying to talk her down from it, I'm sorry about Pumpernickel, but here's your new one. She's not buying it. And part of it is that Ray's he's not digesting this, is that, as Deborah puts it, when you, as a kid, lose a pet, you have to go through a slight mourning process before you can get a new animal. I mean, even as an adult, you're still going to go through it, especially if it's a pet you've had for a while. Dog, cat, bird, no matter the type of animal, you're going to want to mourn for a little bit before you could take it on. More so as you get up in age. Like my grandmother, right now she has a no more dogs thing after Odie passes away, but with that, I think that will probably go by the wayside after a bit. But it gets worse when you actually lose the critter. Now, in order to give Allie some closure, they decide to have a funeral, hence the title of this episode, Pet Cemetery, which, yes, it is a reference to the Stephen King novel of the same name, only cemetery is actually spelled correctly. Well, Ray doesn't like the fact that they're doing the funeral. He's saying it's morbid, and he's actually talked into digging the hole. And I just love the way that Deborah tells him, you're digging a hole. And the way she says it, it's a two-for. It's her putting her foot down and basically saying, you keep trying to argue this, you're digging your own grave there. Well, they get to the cemetery bit. Frank is just out there just for moral support. I mean, when he's asked to say something, he's like, Pumpernickel, like the hamster, love the bread. But by the end of it, he's even in tears, and he goes, damn hamster. And there's a moment in there where Ray does come to an understanding with Allie, where he sees that Allie is getting older and seeing that it is actually what his wife said, and that this is something that's going to be good for closure. But then again, she also recovers pretty quickly and asks for a bunny, which we never find out if they actually get her a rabbit, other than like a little one-off gag about, that's a bigger hole. I'd like to imagine they do, but they never bring it up. So it's, do they get the rabbit? Did they not get the rabbit? You decide. The only other mention of a rabbit is a retroactive one, which that's a Frank moment, but we'll get to that episode when we get to it. If I remember right, I think that's season 7, so 2 seasons time. We also, in this episode, we find out Frank also likes using a metal detector, which is why I guess he's going along the funeral like, I can use the metal detector for something. Marie, she's her typical self. There's actually one little moment I do really love where she's looking for Pumpernickel. Well, it's actually after they found him. She's cleaning up while the boys are off trying to either revive Pumpernickel or get a replacement, and they're waiting for Deborah to come home. Frank's out napping. She goes through the freezer, and she finds a bottle of vodka in there. Which, the thing about that, I'm like, why is that in there? Why didn't they notice that earlier? One of those little things. And why would Deborah hide one of her After Marie liquor stashes in the freezer? The kids can find it. I don't know, maybe Ray left it in there. But just the way she looks at it. But that's not the funny thing about it. The funny thing is she goes to try to wake up Frank. Frank sees it and is like, what have you been doing? You celebrate with a bottle of hooch? That little moment always makes me smile to see that. Frank, I'll say, definitely has some of the best lines in this episode when it comes to zingers and making you laugh. So it kind of balances out the, I wouldn't say morbidity of the fact it's dealing with death, which from a family aspect is something that anybody can identify with, whether you're coming at it from the point of view of a parent or from the child. Now, when I first saw this show was when I was younger, so I did understand it a little bit more from Allie's perspective, and now older, even though I don't have kids now, I do understand it from the parent's point of view. But getting back onto Frank and Peter Boyle, his zingers do kind of balance that off, and it does allow for some interesting little dynamics between all the characters, like when he's bringing up bad animals when Marie is trying to make Allie feel better by telling her that animals do go to heaven with him, which is a question that any kid is going to wonder. I mean, I wondered that as a kid. Do animals go to heaven with us? Does that mean the bad animals don't go to heaven? They go to heck, or hell, as Frank so pointedly puts it. And he's the one arguing that, one, there's a whole separate heaven for animals, which I'm like, where the hell did he get that? And he's like, it's in the Bible. And of course he's like, I've read plenty of damn Bibles. There's a couple ways you could take that. One, that he's talking about the fact there's multiple different religions. But more, he's probably talking about specific volumes of it. Like, he read through that one, he read through that one. But then his whole thing about bad animals, and that he got bit by a dog as a kid when he was a Ute around the time of World War II, and he has a feeling that that particular dog is in hell, sliding her butt across the devil's carpet. Now, the best zinger in that little story is a World War II joke, because it's a German Shepherd, and the German Shepherd's name was Ilsa, and he's like, I was walking so close to her territory. Back in those days, the Germans were very sensitive about their territory. Just the way he says it so matter-of-factly, in the pause as the audience laughing and the other characters looking at him like, I cannot believe you just said that. But it's the truth. What was that whole thing they were talking about? They wanted a little living space? I would say that's a little sensitive about your territory. I think, what was it that Mel Brooks once said about it? That Hitler just wanted a little piece of Poland, a little piece of France. See how many people get that reference. But definitely one of the best zingers, and it got a bigger laugh out of me rewatching this episode than I thought it would. It's been so long since I've seen it, but it is a good one-liner. Now, this is a term I haven't used at all when bringing up this show yet, but in television parlance, it's one that should pop up. But you can consider this episode a bottle episode if you want to start throwing the terminology out. For those of you who don't know, a bottle episode is an episode of a TV show that's produced cheaply, and the scope is very restrictive, and it usually uses as few non-regular characters as possible, and in this episode's case, it uses just the main cast and the kids. You don't really see any of the other ones in there. And it uses locations that are already built. Like if you're going to apply it to Star Trek, it would take place entirely on the Enterprise, with maybe like one scene off of it, and they film it all at once. But for this episode, it's the already produced interiors and then the one exterior set for the backyard, which I think has been used a couple times before this, so they already had it, so they just got to light it and then do the thing with the rain, which is a complex effect, but I mean, with how long Hollywood's been around by this point, it's pretty easy to do, relatively speaking. Now, they're mainly used when a previously script idea they had, it falls through and they have to do another one on short notice. Now, you usually will find these more in hour-long drama shows or other ones, like Star Trek has a lot of examples of bottle episodes throughout all the series. I'm sure House and other ones probably have good examples of bottle episodes. And even if they can be pretty obvious when you look at them, that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. You could tell the restricted scope means you got to focus more on the dialogue and you got to focus more on the characters. And here, it focuses on that family dynamic, which you get both the drama and the comedy, and it meshes well together. I don't know if I would say this is a classic episode, but it's a pretty good one. Definitely goes on the non-skip list. Like I said when I was reviewing Italy, all of the first disc of this season, they're all ones that I would not skip. Like if you're marathoning through the show and only watching the ones that are a necessity, I'd say none of the ones on this disc skip. You know, unless you're just trying to get through the big ones. In that case, you might want to put this one by the wayside. But this is definitely one to watch, especially if you're a parent trying to figure out how to approach the topic of death with your kids. This might give you a little bit of an idea of how to approach the topic. Gently, with the right amount of sensitivity, and try to get them to the point where they're begging for a rabbit. I'm just kidding about that, but, you know, get them in the right mindset. Well, and that's really all I got to say about it. If you're wondering what I'm doing, I'm reaching over for the DVD case. Not really much else to say about it. I mean, acting pretty good from all the characters. I mean, the twin actors, Sullivan and Sawyer, then it is what it is with them. I mean, out of all the Barone characters, are the ones that usually have the weakest ones, but it's kid acting. And Madeline Sweden usually does a pretty decent job, and here she still does a pretty decent job with it, especially since she has a little bit more to work with than she normally does. I think the last time she had this much to work with was the episode where Ray was in hell, and before that the one when she was acting up and they did active listening. Well, next episode, that's a good one. That one will have some deleted scenes, and that's one definitely don't skip. It's going to be The Author, which, if I remember right, that's the one where Ray is trying to write a book. Might be wrong on that. If I am, I will correct that next time. Till then, guys.